Do we need to be concerned about JJ McCarthy? He had a second procedure on his right knee. A second one. How concerned do we have to be? Let's talk about it. Things haven't gone off to the best start for Minnesota Vikings quarterback JJ McCarthy. He had a great preseason debut against the Las Vegas Raiders, but just days later had surgery to fully repair a torn meniscus in his knee, and that puts him out for the entire season. They chose the full repair over the trim because they want him to be good for the long term, and they don't have to rush him. He is 21 years old, and they believe he is the future of the Minnesota Vikings. But he did have a second procedure done to his knee, and this is where things get confusing, so let's straighten out and give you the facts. ESPN's Kevin Seifert reported right before Kevin O'Connell took the podium for his weekly press conference on Wednesday that he had a second, quote, surgery with a biological injection, end quote, to his knee. Now, that's a really important word, surgery. And this is where things get really, really weird. Ben Gessling of the Minnesota Star Tribune confirmed Seifert's report that he had a biological injection to deal with intermittent swelling, which is relatively normal for something like this. Whenever you're healing a body part, swelling is natural. Sometimes it's concerning, sometimes it's not. Right now, there are no changes to his recovery timeline, but this is where things get really murky. To be clear, says Gessling, source said it was just an injection for McCarthy, no second surgery. This was shortly before 2 p.m., so about almost an hour after Seifert's initial reporting. This is where things get even more confusing. At 5:50 p.m. on Wednesday Central Standard Time, Ben Gessling tweets this, quote, a little more context on JJ McCarthy's procedure at the end of the day. The biologic or platelet-rich plasma, which is becoming a much more normal thing, injection he received at TCO in Egan to reduce swelling in his knee came after an exploratory procedure to confirm there was no longer issue. Once they did that, he received the injection to reduce swelling. Just wanted to add those details. He technically did have a procedure, but the injection, not any surgery, was the remedy to the problem. This is probably common sense to anyone who's had the procedure done, but thought I'd add it to give as full a picture of the situation as I could. Main thing is, was recovery and timeline remain on course. This is really confusing because if you have an exploratory procedure, that requires an incision. That is essentially a knee scope. So I went and I asked Gessling myself. So what was the exploratory procedure? Ultrasound, MRI, scope, and this is what we got from Gessling. Quote, I know they made an incision to get in there and look at it. I'd assume they did that through arthroscopic surgery since that'd be the least invasive way to get in there. I know they looked at it after an incision, determined it could be treated with PRP, and gave him the shot, end quote. So why are they saying it's not a surgery? It is a surgery. Gessling essentially said that. Now, he didn't 100% confirm and he was going off assumptions, but there are very few people more plugged into the Minnesota Vikings than Ben Gessling. Why don't they just call it an arthroscopic exploratory surgery, a knee scope? Guys have scopes all the time. Now, Vikings fans might remember that Sharif Floyd had a scope and they sliced a nerve in his knee, ending his career. That is an essentially rare outcome. Nerves often show themselves very easily, and it's easy to work around them. A knee scope, take a quick peek. That's it. That's something that you can do pretty quickly. It's something you can do easily, but it's still considered a surgery. So what do we have here? We have some interesting things going back and forth, using the word surgery, not using the word surgery. Now, I've had multiple surgeries myself, including an emergency appendectomy that saved my life. That is a surgery that is a major one. Mine was major. I have a 12-inch incision down my stomach. That is what a lot of people consider surgery. So maybe the verbiage and the vernacular that they're trying to use is PR purposes to try and just put people at ease that there's nothing going to be wrong long-term with JJ McCarthy. But it is still a surgery. So what are we doing here? Why is there so much inconsistency with the reporting in this aspect? I will say this. The big factor here that you need to be concerned about, regardless of any of the semantics with the procedure, with how they're treating him, the recovery timeline is still the same as it was before. The Vikings are expecting to have JJ McCarthy for training camp. They're expecting to have him for the start of the 2025 season, and it's likely he'll be ready for OTAs and minicamp, which will continue his development process and make things much easier once he does take the field. Now, there is still an outside chance that Sam Darnold gets some form of contract with the Minnesota Vikings in 2025 to be the guy, to be the actual bridge. That a lot of that will depend on this season and what kind of interest he receives outside the organization. The Vikings may be able to bring him back for 10, 15, $20 million next year, and he may want to come back because of the situation that he's in. That will be decided over time. But right now, this has been a really weird story that has had some twists and turns, but in the end, all you need to know, McCarthy's going to be fine, and so will the Minnesota Vikings. I'm Tyler Forness with A to Z Sports. Skol Vikings.